Heisman, Riggins, and Mosley. How did you come up with the nickname Curly?
Reporting from Redskins Park, I'm James Brown.
What led you to television?
It's the closest thing to being a part or participant in the sport.
There's not really much you can say about James Brown. You can't say a bad thing about him because he started off his career from the bottom. One thing led into another. Now he's probably, the best commentator during the football game.
Good morning to all of Romero's crew.
And welcome everyone to another edition of Inside the NFL.
He is the gold standard by which all hosts and everybody that has a television show will be measured by.
Your top 5 teams in the NFL are who? Starting with the best.
We call him the hardest working man in television, as you well know, and I consider myself the hardest working wife in television.
You can't blame Dorsey for wanting you to slow down a little bit.
My father's always been a family person. He loved his mother, he loves his brothers and sister, he loves his wife, he loves me.
Hi, I'm James Brown. Very nice meeting you, man.
That's a call.
And this is my life, 365.
When you talk about Allen Iverson, it's better to talk about something negative. It sells more.
I've taken the team and given it back to the fans.
No, I throw it back in so I can catch him again.
My Life 365 with your host, Ron Thompson.
There's an expression that I hear now that I have to make sure I stay conscious of, even at this stage in my life and career. Don't tell me you have passion for something if there's no pursuit. So if you say you want it badly, then I better see the follow through. I better see the actions. A lot of that probably comes from seeing my mother and father, God bless them, and what they did. My mother and father worked hard, not unlike your parents, to raise 5 kids, and it wasn't easy. Mom and dad were high school graduates who I love to say had PhDs in common sense, drive, and determination. They were very driven because they overcame a lot of challenges, and education was the key. I have a sense of responsibility to carry on the legacy of my parents and hopefully providing for not only my wife, my daughter and grandkids, but my brothers and sister as well.
Let's go back to high school. Describe what that time was like for you as a ball player growing up at DeMatha in the Washington, D.C. area.
Exciting times, learning-oriented times, paying the price to be better from the basketball perspective. Because Ronnie, I was not a gifted player.
What was interesting is when James came to DeMatha, he was going to be a baseball player. He had played with Steve Garrett, another great athlete who came in with him, and Steve had introduced me to James when they were in the 8th grade, and he says, James is a good baseball player. I think he'd scored 1 point in basketball in the 8th grade, so no one anticipated he was going to be a basketball player.
When I went to Morgan Wooten's basketball camp during the summer, I ate up everything he had to tell me in terms of what it would take to become a better basketball player.
The fact of the matter was, this guy practiced his craft and became very, very skilled at what he did. And that, I don't know that I've seen very many high school or college basketball players better than James.
He was the guy everybody wanted to be like. He was a great player, had a big influence on me coming to DeMatha because I wanted to be like him.
And it really worked well in terms of me progressing as a basketball player and becoming a 2-time high school All-America my junior and senior year, humbled and blessed to be the player of the year back in the ancient year 1969, and then being recruited by every major college in the country and getting an opportunity to realize a dream that my mother and father wanted for us, and that was to go on to college and first and foremost get the best possible education.
He talked with my mom and she just sat down, talked to him heart to heart with all of us. We were all listening to the conversation, and it's like, what do you want to do? He wants to play basketball. What are you going to do after basketball? And that was the main thing. After you get your education, then what you going to do?
So now I read this, and this was kind of interesting. Ted Kennedy played some role in you making your college decision. What role was that?
Former Senator Ted Kennedy, God bless him, was an influential figure for sure as a respected alumnus of Harvard.
I actually went with James down to Senator Kennedy's office. We went out to lunch, we visited the Capitol and so on. I remember him saying, I think it'll sound better James Brown, Harvard, then James Brown, professional basketball player.
The two guys who really had the most influence on me going to Harvard were two alums in the area. One, Barrett Lindy, who was a builder, very prominent Jewish builder in town, and an African-American gentleman by the name of Clifford Alexander, who was involved in the first elected competition, if you will, for mayor in DC. Both eminently successful graduates, and they had an awful lot of influence on me, talking about what going to a school like Harvard would provide, and the alumni network, and we've remained very good friends.
After college, graduate, get your degree, good basketball career, you get drafted by the Atlanta Hawks, you get cut.
I knew that those 4 years that I was at Harvard, that I did not work as hard on my game as I did in high school. You can't make up for it in one summer. That was the reason why I didn't make it. I failed to work as hard to stay on top as I did to get to the top. And when I got cut by the Atlanta Hawks, that was a seminal moment, Ronnie, where I said to myself then, I would never allow an opportunity to pass me by that I was ill prepared for.
The NBA didn't work out. What led you to television?
Another big Washingtonian name, Petey Green. I was on his TV show, and he says, at the end of the show, there's an opening here at Channel 20, UHF station, that then carried the then Washington Bullets games, now the Wizards, of course. I want you to go over there and audition for the job. I'm thinking, well, what can I do to stand out to make this a good shot? Phil Chenier, who was then the team star, was a guy I played ball against in college. So I called Phil on his day off and asked him to come with me over to Channel 20 to simulate a halftime interview.
You know, I said, sure. We went over to Channel 20 and did the mock interview, and you know, the rest is history. So maybe I made JB what he is today. That's what it is.
And I was blessed to get the job. So that's how I got into TV early on, while still working a full-time job in corporate America at Xerox, but I was moonlighting as an analyst then for the Washington Bullets, applying that work ethic that I was telling you about. If I wanted it badly, I was going to go for it and do everything necessary to get better at it.
Coming up next on My Life 365 with your host, Ron Thompson.
JB's he's had a great career being the guy to lead other people to greatness.
The Boston Celtics select Len Bias of the University of Maryland.
Were you really hoping that it could have been Boston in the end?
Yeah, I really was hoping that it was Boston, and my dream came true.
In 1986, you were a young reporter, and you're the one that actually broke the story about Len Bias's death being linked to cocaine. Describe that period.
Ronnie, that was a hard one, because I knew Len, I knew his family. I got a phone call early in the morning. I don't know what time it was, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I get the phone call from one of our guys at Channel 9 where I was working, who had good contacts with the police and the like, and told me he had heard the story about over the radio about Len Bias being wheeled in with a drug overdose and had passed away. And I woke up and called the station back and talked about what I was going to do. And the station had me then doing the news, because that was the #1 news story in the area. So as opposed to just being a sports reporter, that's when I got called into a news role to go out and do that. And Ronnie, one of the hardest things was, you balance as a reporter your personal feelings and your professional responsibility.
Now, shortly after reporting on the Len Bias incident, you blasted onto the national scene, CBS Sports. Nervous?
Yeah, nervous probably describes it well. By the time I get to the network level, the benefit of having done Saturday morning public affairs programs, doing Fast Break, a local show with my high school coach, Morgan Wooten. Getting an opportunity to do some sportscasting here locally, filling in on the weekends or during the weekday. Then doing the work with the Bullets and Black Entertainment Television and USA Network, etc. All of that prepared me for that, so that while I was excited about it, I didn't feel I was unprepared at all.
I mean, it's James, that's heck. He wanted everything he ever did because he worked harder than almost everybody else. He was better prepared than almost everybody else. You couldn't outwork him, couldn't out-prepare him.
He's a very intelligent man. He wants to understand everything. He doesn't just say, I'll do something, and just says, yeah, I'll show up and everything. No, preparation is key to him in everything he does.
JB, you've been described by many as relentless, hardest working man in show business, and a man without limits.
You know, I don't want to be considered a jack of all trades but a master of none. That, for sure, I don't want to be. But I don't like to be pigeonholed where people tell me what I can't do. And I especially remember when I was blessed to be named the co-host of the Fox NFL Sunday Show. I read in the paper where someone with whom I had worked at the network level saying, now folks will find out that he really doesn't know the game of football and that he's in over his head and he'll fail quickly. And you know, as a ball player,
that drove you even harder.
And hello again, everyone. I'm James Brown, and welcome to the opening weekend of the NFL and, of course, our 10th season of Fox NFL Sunday. Good to be alongside with you.
My job is to be conversant with whatever the task is at hand, whatever the subject matter is, and to elicit the best out of those with whom I work.
He just has a knack of knowing when to move to a new, question, when to move to somebody else for another perspective, when to lighten the mood, when to get serious. He just has this instinct about him that is really unique, and that's something you can't teach.
5 seconds. 4, 3, start your move. 2.
And welcome, everyone, to another edition of Inside the NFL right here on Showtime. I'm James Brown alongside of our earthquake-making trio of guys, Phil Simms, Chris Collinsworth, and Warren Sapp.
He's going to watch the proceedings, listen to what everybody has to say, take the place of the person at home who's listening to what we're saying. And when the normal questions pop up that a fan of the game would have, JB asks it on the moment.
As he's playing right now, can we honestly put him in that elite category? Brady, Breeze, Manning, Rivers, etc.
Talent-wise, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
and
I
what
think
do you want
talent-wise, but I got to
performance-wise
see
as well?
more. I got to see more.
You have to have chemistry, and it can't be fake, because you would understand. You would see fake. The whole thing about us four is neither one of us has an ego. And once you don't have an ego, you can push each other. It's almost like a locker room.
I think the toughest things for guys like him is their ego's got to be out of it. In other words, they got to give the assists, but they're never going to be talked about being a good scorer. And, if you can do that, that's what you should do in the job. It's a credit to you. He's had a great career being the guy to lead other people to greatness.
Coming up next on My Life 365 with your host, Ron Thompson.
The other cars are a little loud and noisy, muscle cars, stout cars. This is just a nice cruiser. I can get in this and drive to California.
Today we are here at Huntingtown High School doing our 9th annual car show. And today we have record crowds here. Today I guess we're going to top close to 300 cars. The benefit of this show, the money goes to the Cancer Society this year, in the MS Society.
Ever since I met James Brown, he have always went for anything that's for charity, he is into it. He's loved helping people. And I met him a few years back. He had a problem with his automobile and I helped him along and I could help him. And we've been friends ever since.
Back in the day, I was focusing on sports. That was my thing. But even at DeMatha, I always had a love of cars. After all was said and done, when my basketball playing days were over, I was so happy to be in a position to be able to afford a couple of these old school cars, and I've been loving it ever since.
Where did JB's passion for cars come from? How did that come about?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. All I know is they kept growing. I didn't even know how many he had until I was at a picnic with a friend and he kind of, gave the secret. Right.
If that's one thing that occupies his time when we want some of his time, it's those antique cars. Every Friday, every Saturday, every weekend when football is over, he is in the garage or on the road with one of those cars. And you're right, it is an infatuation. I just don't see. I don't see the love for them.
This is a 1937 Ford Coupe.
Okay.
This is the car that my wife commented about how she liked the way it looked.
Uh-huh.
That to me, as I told you earlier, that was
That was
to
it.
go and get it.
Let's test it out.
All right, let's go do that. Sounds good.
And who comes up with your names? This one is called Too Sweet. The Camaro is Black Pearl.
Black Pearl.
Black Pearl. Do you name them?
I wish I was that creative. My niece, Ryan, named the car. She's just out of school about 3 or 4 years. She's very creative. So I probably have somewhere between 15 and maybe 17 cars, but 10 or 11. Hey, nothing like Jay Leno, who I got a chance to see his collection with a couple hundred, and some other folks who got collections like that, but that's fine. This is just fine for me.
Coming up next on My Life 365 with your host, Ron Thompson.
Let me just say, I did ask Pastor Weaver to make sure that I was within protocol here. I said, Pastor, how long do I have to preach today? He said, Brother Brown, you can preach as long as you want. But at 12 o'clock, we pack up for the picnic.
I just want to make certain that I am as excellent an ambassador for Christ, a very strong living epistle, walking upright and doing everything that I do excellently unto him. If I meet that mark, then I'm doing okay.
You're a minister now. How did you get the calling? When did you know that this is next for me?
Success as defined by the world wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, because you truly can acquire a lot of things, but they don't really mean anything if there's no inner peace and happiness. And I knew that the void that was there was a meaningful and strong relationship with God, because as one gets older, you realize that there's got to be some serious meaning to life.
We just came back from a trip and someone actually called us on the phone and told us that various people in our congregation were called into the ministry, including James. So we kind of learned it through a third person. And then when we returned to our church, our pastor pulled us aside and asked him if he was going to accept the calling. And we weren't quite sure what it meant at the time, but God is so good because he allows you to grow into the role.
Talk to us a little bit about the dialogue that you had with him when he knew, you know what, I've been called.
He said, it's not me, Pastor, but Lord, I sit down and God gives me everything I need to know. And I speak exactly what he tells me to speak.
When I'm standing in a pulpit, that's no joke. It's the real thing. You're talking about impacting people's lives, and you're talking about rightly dividing and speaking God's word.
Some folks, believe it or not, think that God has given up on them because they have let God down so many times that they feel God doesn't hear them anymore. A spiritual dead end. And as a result, some see that there's no real reason to continue to seek a relationship with God as a result. Well, God gives us the experience of the children of Israel and Moses at the Red Sea to help encourage us.
When his mom went to be with the Lord approximately 5 years ago, I think it was the most difficult thing that he's ever had to encounter because he was so very close to his mother. So it really taught him to dig deeper in the Word and to truly allow the Lord to be his all in all.
When she passed, do you think that the passing of her pushed him to the point of becoming an ordained minister? Do you think that it's pushed him to the point that this is something that, you know, my mom would want me to walk
I think
this
so.
walk?
I think so, because of the impact that Marianne had on JB's life. You know, it definitely had an influence in pushing him to a place where he wanted to be able to say, I know my mom would be proud of me becoming a pastor. I know my mom would be proud of my Christian walk that I'm walking.
I've taken that baton and tried to make certain that I carry on the legacy of my mother as well as I possibly can, and to represent her and my father as well as I possibly can by being the best example and the best minister that I can be.
When you come to that dead end, if we hear about you crying and running all around town, here, there, and everywhere, crying in frantics and in fear, we know you're not walking in faith, because faith says the Lord will make a way. The Lord will get me out of this, and I know that.
I believe that message rang loudly and clearly today amongst the people. And the beauty of a message like James gave today is not something that will just simply be with you for a moment, but will be something that people can indeed take and embrace for a long time to come and make it a part of their life's being.
When it's all said and done, none of us want to think about that time. How would you want JB to be remembered?
When that day comes, whether it comes for you first or me first or him first, I think that's what I want people to know, that he was one of the best people I know, and he had an incredible influence in my life.
That's why I want to be, he wanted to be remembered as a child of God, obedient child of God that loves God's children.
I'd love for him to be remembered as a family man, one who always put his family first. I did not grow up in the home with him and my mom together, but he was never absent in my life.
How would you want to be remembered?
That to me defines whether or not a life is well lived, is the degree to which you have imparted and given to others to contribute to their meaningful life. I mentioned earlier on, my aim is to esteem others above myself. So I will feel like a day has been successful if I've given meaningfully, valuably in the life of another.
In my eyes, this is the Grease Mobile. What kind of car is this, first of all? What kind of car?
First of all, just so that I can become contemporary, it's the Grease Mobile.
All right,
no matter what the tag says.
JB was upstairs in the shower, and I heard this blood-curdling scream. Cliff! Ah! Help! And I ran upstairs, and in the corner was a spider. Get it! Cliff! Get the spider!